We have a lot to discuss today. The agenda will be as follows. We'll have the chairman's message, and Jim will open the meeting in a few minutes. Then we'll have the official business in the voting of the resolutions, and then you'll have a brief speech from myself that sets out what has been accomplished in the 2 years since I've been in this position as CEO, and more importantly, where we're going in the next year or so on our value creation roadmap. And then we'll formally close the meeting thereafter. So just a couple of notes for this particular meeting. The majority of the votes have been cast and submitted by proxy. So those people won't have the ability to vote electronically. We do have some shareholders in person in Toronto that will be voting when we bring the resolutions forward. Shareholders will have an opportunity to ask questions after my talk at the end, and your questions can be submitted via the chat function, and we'll remind you of that afterwards. I think, given we're on the Teams platform, you can submit the question via the chat platform, and then you can also come off mute and verbally ask the question if necessary.
1.6. We want you to go back and say, do you remember that stock that I told you to buy? Well, it is not XYZ.
Oh, wait a minute. I think the meeting's starting right now.
We've been hacked.
We've been hacked, yeah. Well, we should, that's fine. If everybody can remain on mute as we get through the meeting, that would be great. And so now it's my pleasure to turn over the meeting to our chairman, Mr. Jim Sinclair, who will formally open the meeting. And I believe, Jim, you also have a message to shareholders as well before we get into the formal.
And you can raise your hand. You raise your hand in the stop position when I use my 5 minutes, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim.
And thank you, Steve. I'd like to say good morning to everybody. Welcome to the 2023 Annual General and Special Meeting of TRX Gold Corporation. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Yes, my name is Jim Sinclair, and I am the chairman of the corporation, and I have the permission to proceed with this opening in accordance with the corporation's articles and the approval of the board. I will act as chair of the meeting. I wanted to touch base with all of you stockholders because of the nature of the fact that we have to accept a price, we don't make a price. Number two, I wanted to take a moment or two to discuss the advent of new management. I can tell you it's been 22 years of a very interesting experience in Tanzania. And I would warn anybody that if a junior finds significant property, boy, is that junior in trouble. So we survived through many entities, countries, and people, and parliamentarians that were hired to maintain our ownership of the property. And the strategy was to retreat to the best we had and defend Fort Buckreef with everything we had. And we did, and our knight in shining armor was the president, Magufuli, bless his soul. And I've never met him, but he stepped into the situation after reviewing it and gave his blessing to our continuance of the operation. So, in a sense, thank you to him and his family. The gold price has been a bore to most, but in fact, let's look at it. It is significantly higher. And the reason for that is because most people investing now are of a different ilk than the last two bull markets in gold. The fundamentals are still functioning, and that's why we have a furnace put up and back eight, and back eight. So it's a very slow grind. All of the items that normally and traditionally support a much higher price for gold are there and happening, such as inflation and deficits and things we've discussed together many times. But there is something new, and that something new is what's going to command the future of gold. And what that is now, I would say, would be best called a collaboration, rather than an amalgamation. That collaboration you've even seen happening as recently as yesterday, in the acceptance of the yuan, in light of the dollar, the basic strength of the dollar having its roots in fact that contracts during petrodollar time, in anything and everything around the globe were made in dollars. That means the settlement of the contract required dollars in order to maintain the dollar's position as king. We are in a war, but it's a different kind of war. Neither Russia nor China wants Canada or the US. They figure that you've got enough problems over there, they don't need to get involved. But it is economic. And if it is economic, it's primarily currency. And the motivation for gold this time, in my opinion, will be a new role of gold in a new currency accepted by all. That's, in my opinion, not too far off in the sense that it's about Bretton Woods. So I think the product we have is going to take care of us very nicely. What we needed desperately was the new group that you see here on your screens, the new management of the company, because very rarely in this industry is there an excellence in management. And if you've seen our balance sheet, if you look how the company is run, if you see how, for instance, Steve leads us, Andrew has set up together a place where our workers are comfortable, safe, and happy. And this is being run, cash being developed, is being taken care of in a manner that doesn't exist in any other company, in my opinion, in the industry. I want to compliment the team, and Steve especially for that, Andrew for the excellence that he's created in Tanzania and the happiness of our employees. You have to have two things. You have to have the deposit, but the deposit is useless without the level of management. Quite simply, I took it as far as I could. But I'm also extraordinarily intelligent over the many years of experience to know when I met Steve, this was the man that would take it all the way. So you should be very happy now in the unique and excellent management and the excellence of our deposit. Remember, we're only beginning. There's a lot forward. We're open in every direction but up. And with that, I'll leave it, and in the sense that I am absolutely delighted that the company is being run now in a manner no other extraction company has ever been run. And that is going to have a significant impact on the currents, bringing the proper value to the stockholders. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to turn over the meeting now to
We're having some audio issues, Jim, so on your end, so thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words as well. I very appreciate it on behalf of myself, Andrew, and Mike, who's also on the line, and Christina from the management side. And I believe the next order of items on the agenda is to Mr. Betts. It's over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everyone.
And Norm, just before you begin, I forgot to introduce the directors that were on the call.
Sure, go ahead.
To introduce each one of us. So we have, obviously, Jim as the chairman is on the line. We have Norman Betts, who is here as well. Andrew Cheadle, you want to raise your arm, Andrew? And then we have Richard Steinberg. Richard, put up your hand. And as well as Shubo is here with me in Oakville. And you have myself from the management of the company. We have Michael Leonard, our Chief Financial Officer, and Christina Lawley, our VP Investor Relations. Thank you. Go ahead, Norm.
Thank you again, Steve. We'll move through the formalities of the meeting. First, the appointment of scrutineer. Carrie Hobbs from Odyssey Trust Company is present electronically and will act as scrutineer. Evan Strong will be appointed to act as secretary of the meeting. I have before me the declaration of Odyssey Trust Company, transfer agent for the corporation, attesting to the due mailing on January 24th, 2023 of the notice of meeting, the information circular, and proxy. I would ask the secretary to table the declaration of mailing and the notice of meeting and information circular and append them to the minutes of this meeting. We have extra copies available and would invite any shareholder or proxy holder to review them. In this view, I will dispense of calling for reading of the notice and will ask the secretary to file the declaration as to mailing with the minutes of this meeting. Section 2.02 of the corporation's bylaws stipulates that a quorum for the transaction of business at a meeting of shareholders is 2 persons present in person, holding or representing not less than 20% of the total number of issued shares and entitled to vote. I have before me the scrutineer's interim report indicating that there are a total of 292 shareholders represented by proxy, holding 143,370,676 shares, which represents 51.812, just under 52% of the issued and outstanding shares. I therefore declare that a quorum is present and that the meeting is regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business. As all votes have been cast by way of proxy, I confirm that as management's proxy nominee, Stephen Mulrooney will be making the motions, as well as a significant shareholder of the corporation. Shibu Rikit will be seconding the motions. The minutes of the last annual meeting held on February 25th are filed in the minute book and available for inspection. With your consent, I propose we dispense of the reading of these minutes, and the minutes will be taken as read, approved, and adopted as tabled. Is there any objection? No question or objections have been raised. Thank you. The first item of business is the presentation of the audited financial statements. Audited financial statements for the last fiscal year ended August 30th, 2022, together with the auditor's report, were made available under the corporation's profile on SEDAR and mailed to registered shareholders who requested them. I declare that the audited financial statements for the last fiscal year of the corporation ended December 31st, 2022, are hereby received as submitted. The management update will be provided by our Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Mulrooney, and our Chief Operating Officer, Andrew Chettle, at the end of the meeting. The next item of business is to appoint an auditor for the ensuing year and authorization of the directors to fix their remuneration. As noted in the Management Information Circular, management has proposed that Dale Matheson Carr-Hilton Labonte, LLP, Chartered Accountants of Vancouver, British Columbia, be reappointed as auditor of the corporation. I will now call for the following motion. Be it resolved that Dale Matheson Carr-Hilton Labonte, LLP, Chartered Accountants, excuse me, it's cold season, be appointed as auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year, and the directors of the corporation be authorized to fix the remuneration to be paid to the auditor. Stephen?
Yeah, I moved that resolution be adopted.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Chubo, sorry. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? As a majority of proxy votes are in favor, the motion is carried. The next item of business is to set the number of directors of the corporation for the ensuing year. As noted in the Management Information Circular, management recommends that the number of directors be set at 6. I now call for the following motion. Resolve that the numbers of directors of the corporation to hold office for the ensuing year is set at 6. Stephen?
I move that that resolution be adopted, Norm.
Yeah, and I second the motion.
Thank you, Shubo. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? It's a majority of the proxy votes are in favor. The motion is carried. The next item of business is the election of directors to serve until the next annual meeting of shareholders and until their successors are duly elected and qualified. There are 6 director positions to be filled. Management has nominated the following persons to serve as directors of the corporation to hold office until the next annual general meeting of TRX Gold and until their successors have been duly elected. James E. Sinclair, Stephen Mulrooney, Norman Betts, Andrew Chettle, Shubo Rickett, Richard J. Steinberg. The corporation has received no other nominations for directors. I therefore declare the nominations for directors are closed. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? Thank you. I will now call for the following motion. Resolved that James E. Sinclair, Steve Mulrooney, Norman Betts, Andrew Cheadle, Shubo Rickett, Richard J. Steinberg be elected as directors of the corporation to hold office until the next annual meeting.
I move that that resolution be adopted.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shubo. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? As a majority of the proxy votes are in favor, the motion is carried. The next item of the business before this meeting is for a special resolution to amend the articles of the corporation to change Part C of the attached schedule to the articles of the corporation. Other rules or any provisions, bracket, if any, is that section. That section currently restricts general meetings of shareholders held outside of Alberta to either Vancouver, British Columbia, or Toronto, Ontario. The proposed amendment will now allow the board of directors at their sole discretion to determine the location and manner of any meeting of shareholders going forward. In order to be passed, the amendment resolution requires the affirmative vote of 2/3 majority of the votes cast. I shall therefore ask for the following motion. Bear with me. Resolved as a special resolution of the shareholders of TRX Corporation that, pursuant to section 173 bracket 1 bracket B of the Business Corporation Act of Alberta, the articles of corporation be amended by changing Part C of the attached schedule of the articles of the corporation, other rules or provisions as follows. Meetings of the shareholders may be held at any location or manner as determined by the board of directors from time to time. Any one director or officer of the corporation is hereby authorized and directed to do all things and to execute all instruments, documents, articles of amendment, or restated articles of incorporation as in their opinion may be necessary or desirable in order to give effect to this special resolution, including, but without limitation, any restatement of the articles of the corporation. And, notwithstanding the approval of the shareholders of the corporation as herein provided, the board of directors of the corporation may, in their sole discretion, revoke this special resolution before it is acted upon without further approval of the shareholders of the corporation.
Is someone getting some coffee or grinding coffee? But Norm, I move that the resolution be adopted.
Yeah, and I second the motion.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shubo. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? As over 2/3 of the proxy votes are in favor, the motion is carried. The regular business of the meeting has completed, and there is no other legal business which may properly come before the meeting, which does not require notice. Since there's no other business, I will call for a motion to terminate the meeting, the formal part of the meeting.
Yeah, I hereby move to the meeting be terminated.
Yeah, and I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Unless anyone is opposed, the formal portion of this meeting is now terminated. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. I hereby declare the meeting terminated, and thank you all once again for your attention and your interest. Jim?
Yes, sir. I'd like to ask Steve to give us his review of, as he said in the beginning, where do we stand now after the 2 years of the introduction of serious, capable, able, effective, young, and energetic management, and very, very well known amongst the financial and technical part of our industry. Steve.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim, for your kind words. And I'm going to ask Andrew and Mike to supplement some of the things that I'll say here, and particularly when we get on to the question and answer section. So, Andrew and Mike, I will poke you throughout the presentation that we're going to give here for various comments. So when we were deciding and putting together the annual general meeting, I wanted to speak to shareholders as opposed to putting forward a formal presentation and slides and things like that. We do a lot of presentations, and shareholders have an opportunity to view those presentations. And we do a lot of live events, either at a conference or virtually, and I know a lot of the shareholders on the line have attended those, and we'll continue to be doing those, so you'll get an opportunity to hear directly. So as Jim mentioned, we've been here approximately 2 years. So I joined in December 2020. Andrew joined the board prior to that, and then formally as Chief Operating Officer in February, and Mike joined shortly thereafter in March of 2021. So the first couple of years of our roles have been really what I'll call preserving value and stabilizing the business and the asset in order for us to get to a position of value creation. So I'm pleased now to say that the business has been stabilized. We do have positive operating cash flow. We have a great relationship in Tanzania from all stakeholders, including national government and local stakeholders, including on the ground. And even, I would say, right down to the ground with the local miners or artisanals in the area, we have very positive working relationships in Tanzania. So this now sets the foundation for growth. Some of the positive surprises that we've incurred is, and we've said this many times in presentations, is there's just a lot of gold in this area, and it is a very underexplored area. Even our own special mining license, I would say, is relatively unexplored. The main zone hasn't really had the level of analysis and in-depth work put into it that really is looking really positive. And I just want to pause here, Andrew, and do you have a couple of words there before I get into formal part of what we've really done? Because that's really where a lot of the growth is going to come from as we line up what we're doing in the next year or so.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, and greetings to all the shareholders that are present today. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Stephen, I can only just reiterate what you've said, and you've been a great supporter of the exploration side of things. There is a lot of gold. There's absolutely no doubt. The main zone in particular remains open at depth and on strike both to the north and to the south, and we're discovering new zones since we've been on board. We also look further afield in the belt, and we see again many opportunities to talk with our neighbours and potential deals ahead of us. With that, Stephen, back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And look, I think we can positively say that, Andrew, you and I really scrubbed the reports before joining the company, and really, I think it's turning out to be more positive and more perspective than we initially thought.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. I mean, the reports that have been done before sort of highlighted the overall resource. Yet, we found, for example, the Anfield zone. We now understand, for example, that the eastern porphyry to the Anfield zone to the Chinese mine to the south represents now a 3-kilometer belt, or another zone that we have to go and explore. That wasn't there two years ago.
So the next day is, as part of our presentation, I'll get into this in a few minutes. The next couple of years will be predominantly focused on the value creation side of things, and we'll go through the steps that we're putting in place in order to spring the real value of the Buckreef property. Right at this point in time, we position the business to have a growing production profile, which is being funded by we have an echo line, so.
Maybe we want to put everyone put their phones on.
Yeah, if you could someone could go on mute, everybody on mute, thank you. We position the business to have a growing production profile to be predominantly self-funded. We have positive operating cash flow, and we're reinvesting that cash flow into the business to grow it and also make it much larger. We believe that Buckreef will be a substantial mine with low cash cost, and there's a significant opportunity for resource expansion. Now, getting into how do we get to this spot? So the first couple of years, I'm not going to lie to anybody, it was a lot of work, and there were some sleepless nights. There's no doubt about that. But we got through it. We got to this point and position in order to position this business and this property to be what I just mentioned in a vision of being a substantial mine with low cash costs with a lot of resources. So when I came in, we had $2 million of cash in the balance sheet. Obviously, we can't do too much in a capital intensive industry with just that amount of capital. So there needed to be capital raises in the beginning. And we did one early last year. We haven't done one in the last year, and we are in a position where our cash balance has remained stable as we continue to invest in the business over the last couple of quarters. We really secured a social license in Tanzania, which is important. I mentioned that. We've worked with government authorities around the mine plan, both in the short and medium term. That's a law in Tanzania that you have to submit a mine plan in an SML. We're on the side of that mine plan. We put a great focus on employees. As many of you guys know and shareholders know, there's been significant changes at the management level of the corporation, as well as at the Buckreef level of the corporation. So we've really put a strong focus on bringing in the right people. As Jim mentioned, it's a young, talented team. I like young, talented people, supplemented with very experienced people. But the majority of the management, both at TRX and at Buckreef, are mid-40s and leading and are very capable and doing a lot of really good work. But also further on down, it's getting people to want to work at TRX and Buckreef. And what we've done there is we put in place simple things like benefit plans at site. We renovated the camp, and you've heard me say this before. I need to be able to stay at camp, or else our employees shouldn't be staying at camp. That is a core philosophy of ours. We have, if we're going to house people, we need to be able to be comfortable staying there too. If we're not comfortable staying there, why should we require someone else to be staying there? So that's a firm fundamental belief, and that has been accepted. And we also went in and did clean up around where the employees were in the organization from an organizational structure, put in place long-term contracts. So now they're able to get things that we take for granted here in Canada, the United States, such as vehicle loans and things of that nature, and cleaned up their contracts and put them into place to be in line with the market in Tanzania. We've made a lot of board changes as well, as a lot of shareholders are aware, and other management changes. We cleaned up a lot of legacy liabilities and lawsuits, both from a government and external perspective on the financial statements. We removed the going concern note last year because of the mine plan that we put in place, and the enterprise was capitalized. If you go through our financial statements now, Mike, how many pages are they? They're like 14 pages versus what? Where are they? 30?
Very clean, very easy to follow. All that lawsuit language gone, going concern language gone. Very simple and straightforward, Stephen. That's correct.
And Mike, you want to just mention one of the things we haven't really mentioned is you've put in place a new accounting system now, and ERP system at site, and a lot of the internal control frameworks have been put in place as well, and we're still continuing to go through those.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Stephen. We invested, back into the business, as you rightly suggested, on the finance side as well. We put in place a new ERP tool, which amongst other things is helping improve that internal control framework with approvals and sort of automated a number of things that were previously manual in nature. It's creating efficiencies, which is certainly beneficial, but it's allowing us here in Toronto to analyze and track the business at a more granular level of detail. So, as we've matured into a producing, cash flow generating, earnings generating operation, we've had to invest in our tools to help us continue to track and analyze this business so we can develop it and grow.
Yeah, and I'm able to get an accounts payable ledger down as real time.
Absolutely. Or close to it.
Exactly. Also at the board level, we put in place a new governance documents and framework. You'll see that on our website. That required quite a bit of work as well. And that's available on our website. But really, a lot of the things these are a lot of the other little things that are around the edges. The real big move was when I came on board with the test plant, which I call the bane of my existence to a certain degree. It was burning $500,000 a month, the company. How do we crawl out of that? And Andrew and I and Mike would just talk to the team, and I've had debottlenecking experience before, working with the likes of McKinsey's and others in my previous roles. And in order to cut off that cash burn, we made a decision to do a quick expansion to that 360 ton per day plant that was initial there. And the whole purpose of that was just cutting off that cash burn to stabilize the business, because this business was not going to be around too long, burning $500,000 a month. We couldn't lay off people because that then doesn't create your social license, and it's backwards momentum as opposed to forwards momentum. So we ordered a ball mill. I think we ordered that ball mill, taking a calculated risk without the mine plan being in place, which we quickly then put in place thereafter. And then that 360 ton per day plant, when we expanded it to 1,000 tons per day, paid for a lot of the cost of the 1,000 tons a day plant too. So that was a very good project. It also, importantly, made us make better decisions. And what I mean by that is, given that we built a third of the plant, when we went out and sought, proposals to build 1,000 ton per day plant in EPC contracts, and we looked at the cost of EPC contracts relative to what we built a third of the plant for, we said, there's no need for an EPC contract here. We're able to build this ourselves, and we've learned how to do this. And this is a really core skill set that has been developed over the last 2 years of being able to build these plants affordably, because there are other 1,000 ton per day plants that we're aware of in other countries that cost $50 million. This one was built for $6.5 million. So you can imagine the markups in the EPC and the equipment requirements that are required. And our plants, we got 90% recoveries. We have utilization that's it's above 1,000 tons per day. So it's operating, as Gaston likes to say, it's like the plant has always been there. So it's operating very, very efficiently. Importantly, too, when we got on the ground in the first couple months, we started to notice a lot of activity in the area. And there is a lot of activity in the area. But what does that mean is, the locals are your best explorers. They know how to find gold. They're living off the land, essentially. It's no different than farming. It's just gold as opposed to crops. And we ramped up the exploration program as a result. And that's where Buckreef West comes in. And then that's where Anfield comes in. And we're now working with the local authorities on areas where we believe that there's even a lot more targets as well that are outside of the SML. And that will take some time. But certainly, we have a good feeling to where there's a lot of gold in this area. So there's the main zone as well. We extended that the strike length of that 30% to over 2 kilometers. The main zone is open along strike. It's open at depth. It's basically in all directions looking extremely good. there's just a lot of blue sky potential here on this property. And that will be a continued focus going forward, because there's the opportunity. It's got to be proven out for significant resource growth. So that's great. The business is stabilized, it's creating positive operating cash flow. We're moving forward. And then, you know, we asked the question, so what? So what's next? So how do we take this asset now that's stabilized, the value's been preserved, the relationships are good, and really get it going from a value creation perspective? So if you look at the mining market, most mines are developed by big studies being done up front. And in those, and then they make a decision to put it into production, and usually that production profile is well above 100,000 ounces. So there were lots of reasons why we went and did it the opposite way at Buckreef and put it in production. It was well drilled in the first 50 meters to 100 meters of the deposit. So it comes to surface, it's 20 meters wide, you could do it affordably, plant payback is extremely quick. So there's a lot of reasons to do that, whereas a lot of deposits that I'm talking about in the other metrics have, for instance, some of them we look at have a $50 million strip before you get to the gold. So there was a lot of reasons to go about the way we did it at Buckreef. But what the market doesn't have versus what the traditional model has is, what are the financial metrics around net present value of the asset, future cash flow, future EBITDA, future profit margins, those sort of metrics that an investor then can say, okay, if they go and execute their business plan, it's worth X. And then they apply a risk factor to it in order to get to a fair stock price. So a lot of the focus now on what we're going to do is we need to start building those financial metrics. And I've said this many times that the 2018 PFS is not large enough. It has a net present value of $150 million. We certainly see a much, much, much more significant project than what that 2018 PFS has in it. So what are we doing about that? And what are we doing to get those metrics to shareholders such as yourself and other investors in order to show them that there's a great value here at Buckreef? So obviously we can do another expansion. So that's in the cards. That this expansion won't be brought online as quickly as the last expansions, because the pressure has been taken off the company, and we'll time it with the cash flows of business, with the various things that we need to do, including some of the things I'm going to talk about here. So in order to get these metrics into the market, we need to redo our resource model and really look at it. And that's predominantly, I would say, Andrew, what's that, about 70% done or so?
Yes, about that, Stephen. Just
yeah. And to give shareholders a sense of what's been required for that, we basically went right back to the assay certificates that came from the drill hole results. So Andrew takes those assay certificates, compares them to the drill hole database, goes and looks at the core that's in the core shed, verifies it to those assay certificates, takes photographs, logs it, and then make sure that it's all correct. And so all of that work has been done. I'll make sure the lithologies are right. And we're going through that right now as we speak. We got infill drill program that's part of that resource model update. But what we wanted to do is make sure that we really scrub the guts of the deposit in the resource model. And we're predominantly through that now. So Andrew, you want to just give a brief summary on what the expected results are at that?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Perhaps I could just take the liberty just very quickly to mention to our shareholders a couple of key things. One is just in terms of our safety, Stephen, if I may.
Yeah.
You know, the team that operates Buckreef has achieved a 1 million hours lost time injury free, which is a significant achievement. And certainly, I'm sure the shareholders are pleased to be knowing that they're owning a company that's operating safely. We also had no COVID cases at the site, which is also quite remarkable. And again, that was a result of a lot of diligence. But your question, however, was about the mineral resources. And it's difficult to give a precise number, but certainly with what we're looking at the moment, encouraged that we're going to be certainly seeking to increase the reserves, which is the key thing, out of this work. But I think we're also going to start seeing some of the satellite deposits coming into the mine plan as well, and that gives us additional flexibility on the ground. And I know everybody would want me to give you a number. I just simply can't do that until we've finished doing this work. But as you said earlier, Stephen, it's very well drilled. We're seeing some spectacular intersections. We're seeing a lot of continuity. Is there very much a deposit here? A big deposit here, absolutely. And I certainly think over the years we're going to see, and I'm quite comfortable to say colloquially, we're going to see millions of ounces added going forward over the years of exploration. The other note for our shareholders is, as we've looked at this work, we see the potential that this deposit will in time go underground. So Jim, I know for many years in the past you had sort of wanted to see this deposit go deeper. We're certainly seeing intersections and higher grade zones that ultimately will drive off the bottom of a pit, and this deposit will go underground and with handsome grades, and it will give a very long life of mine. So with that, Stephen, I'm just going to hand back to you.
Yeah, so just to give shareholders a sense, how does that impact the financial metrics? So the key to the financial metrics of any study is your proven and probable reserves, because that's what goes ultimately into a cash flowing mine plan. So in the 2018 PFS, I believe there's around 900,000 ounces in the reserve category versus 2 million ounces in the measured and indicated category. And that's not a great, what I call conversion ratio. The conversion ratio should be more along the lines of typical deposits in the 70 to 80% range. And so the more ounces we put into the proven and probable category, and Andrew and team need to do the work, the more that net present value of that property will be. And so that is the work that is being done. SGS, our consultant that we're working with on this, will be on site. They're geologists in the next couple of weeks, in order to finalize some of the work that Andrew and team are doing. So then, as part of what we're doing here is, we mentioned this, you need a metallurgical study. So we have metallurgical results from mining the deposit. So it goes through the plant. We know that's 90%. That's the top part. We did a preliminary study a year and a half ago. That was 3 deep holes in the deposit. That, under our current flow sheet that we're using at site, grind crush CIL, was around 90%, high 80s. Other flow sheets, if you grind it finer, because it's fine gold, we're around 94, 95%. But certainly the current flow sheet was around that. There is some, what I'll call harder ore going through the mill today, along with the oxides, but it's mixed with the oxides, and the recovery rates are holding up. So the metallurgical study, basically the 19 holes, the rocks have been sent to the lab. We'll announce who that, given, Andrew, we need to put a press release on who got that, given we got the formal approval from the Mining Commission and that in the last day or two. And it will go to a reputable lab that will do the first 5 to 10 years of the deposit and just verify what we're seeing. The goal here is, hopefully, there are no surprises, and what's occurring in the operations and what we saw at the deep holes is the same going forward. And then again, you apply that to your resource model and your reserves, and you assume a recovery rate for your cash flow profile of your property. Next, and SGS Terrain is on site right now, actually. They're doing a geotechnical study. So what is a geotechnical study? So a geotechnical study is every deposit needs to have pit slopes. So in the 2018 PFS, the pit slopes were roughly 52 degrees, which is shallow for a mining deposit. So what that means is you're removing waste. So the waste, the strip ratio, which is basically a ratio of waste to gold-bearing ore, was around 9 or 9.5. And so what SGS is doing now is they're looking at the deposit and the rock hardness. So the goal here is to hopefully have a much steeper pit angle than 52 degrees. Now the top part, you're not really going to have that because it's soil and it's soft. So it needs to be pushed back. But as you get down 20 meters deeper, you're getting into harder rock and it should be a lot steeper. So that then goes into, again, what we're talking about in mine plans in order to determine your strip ratio. So steeper we can get this, and then we got hard rock on the outer boundaries of the Buckreef shear zone. The more we can have a higher degree slope on the asset, the less strip, the more profitable the asset would be. So that work is ongoing now with SGS. They're doing the geotech holes. I believe there's how many of the SGS professionals, 2 or 3 are on site right now, Andrew?
Yeah, we have 3 on site at the moment, two in from Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the next part is one of the things I've mentioned is the site layout. And what's significant in the site layout is the tailings. So you can get the ore out of the ground pretty easily. Well, it's still not that easy, but it's you can get it out. Then you have to process it. And then the waste has to go somewhere. It needs to go to a tailings facility. So you need a long-term tailings plan. And so we're working with Asanko. We have the areas identified where we can have a long-term tailings plan. And we're now going to move that into the mine plan. And the goal here is, and we got to verify this, and this is part of the geotech work as well, is the waste from the pit from mining, can it build tailings facilities over time? So you need to have a certain material composition for your berms in a tailings facility. We're currently, as we build out the temporary tailings facilities for current operations, using waste from the pit to build those. So we fully expect that will be the case going forward, and we'll put in place a life of mine tailings plan. So we need to get that firmed up, and we're working with Sanko. That's well advanced. We're also working with government authorities on land that, given that there are natural depressions that are better suited for tailings areas, we're working with local authorities on where those are. We've done drone surveys around that with Asanko. We get our drone surveys get down to, I believe, 2 centimeters. Is it, Andrew, roughly, when we look at it?
It is 2 centimeters, Stephen. Again, I'm just going to quickly jump in. You mentioned working with local government authorities several times, and perhaps we should just also mention, of course, the 4th member of our executive team, Khalaf Rashid, who is expert at navigating those passages of government.
And so the next part is obviously capital and capital equipment. So obviously the mine doesn't operate without capital equipment and processing plants. So we've been looking at, and Andrew's made site visits on procuring some of these pieces that will be necessary for much larger deposit. We know where to get ball mills. We've seen them. We roughly know the cost of them. We are working with equipment suppliers in yellow steel, and we're putting all that in place now for a capital cost estimate of what a major expansion would look like long term. That's always in any type of study. I think we'll have some positive surprises there. And remember, we're also in operations, so we have different financing sources for that than would be traditionally available to a greenfield project finance. So we're working on that, and that's starting to get more advanced than less advanced, Andrew. So basically, when we come out with numbers, they'll be pretty firm because we'll know what they are. We know what we can build for too. We've given our experience building plants already.
That's absolutely correct, Stephen. Yeah, and we've been meeting with a number of the suppliers. It's very positive so far.
So with regards to what are we going to do? So we're still determining what level of study do we need. Given we're in production, we have some flexibility under 43-101, the regime that we are in Canada. We'll either come out with a PEA for a broader project, so bringing into place the maybe a theoretical underground mine if we're able to do that, if we have enough information to do that, as well as the satellite deposits that are around the property. But certainly, as we progress throughout the year, the PEA or PFS would be a conceptual, broader project for Buckreef, and then we would also have numbers out on much more granular for short to medium term prospects as well. That will probably be in the PFS, but that will come later, much later than say a PEA. So we're getting to a point where really what we're doing is we're getting the pieces together for a very sound theoretical what does Buckreef look like currently. Then obviously the drill bit is still turning, so it's going to change. So typically you have what it looks like today. Then as you get more drill hole results, you update those to say what it looks like tomorrow. And that is the process that we're embarking on. That's typically done, as I said, up front versus before you build. What we built, got positive operating cash flow to fund this stuff, and now we're coming back and infilling the financial metrics of the business. Exploration, there are still just if we gave Andrew $50 million, there would be a lot more that he could spend on exploration. There's so many targets. Andrew, you want to just sum that up? We've just spoken about this before.
Yeah, we have spoken, but there's so many things, and I'm also smiling and looking at Mike here, who's also from a large corporation background, myself, Gold Corp, Mike Barrick. And this project, if it was in one of the larger major companies, would easily be running a $10 to $15 million a year exploration budget.
Yeah,
we can't afford to do that. We can't afford to do that right now.
20,000 meters is nothing to sniff at.
Yeah, we can't afford to do that right now, of course, but I think it just speaks to the nature of the ground that has so much gold in it.
Yeah, so that's continually stay tuned for drill hole results. Mm-hmm. So in summary, it's been we've stabilized the business, a lot of work in the last 2 years. But I got to say, I'm very positive to what the growth profile looks like here, and what the resource is ultimately going to look like. We knew when we came in and took our roles here that we had a good deposit. I think it's going to end up being better than what we originally anticipated. We've also had some really good learnings on how to operate in Tanzania and how to get things done, really. So we've worked with a lot of local suppliers. We manage our stakeholder relationships. We have CSR programs in place. We're good corporate citizens. I know people, bring up ESG a lot, but that's just being a good corporate citizen. We do the things that are necessary there. And I'm very excited for the next 2 years. And what we're going to do and how we're going to start to spring the value of Buckreef and really focus on springing that value through telling market shareholders what we really have here. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, markets, you can have a lot of gold on the ground, as Jim mentioned, but markets have to understand can you make money at it, right? And the financial metrics. And if gold price goes through the moon, great. That's a bonus. And so we have a lot of other value levers, even if gold prices stay. So I'm very pleased with where things are going, and I'm very pleased with what the team has done, and I'm very proud of what they've done. We have now, when I started, we had maybe 50 employees. There's now around 500 people working at Buckreef.
Yeah, including all the contractors.
Yeah. So it will increase, and I suspect in the next 2 years we'll be up to 700, 750. So it's a growing business, and a lot of work, but it's fun. And so now I'll open the floor to questions. No questions yet?
I think our chairman put his hand up.
Just a statement that I'd like to make to the stockholders and those that are visiting with us right now. This team knows how to keep a stock at a proper valuation. I have proved myself as a master of understanding what makes stocks go up. The marriage of those two is what you want as an investment. You don't want a significant and giant rise followed by a significant and giant fall. What this is set up to do is to be recognized in the marketplace by the growth and quality of management and quality of deposit. But what you've heard here is ticking all the boxes that are required for major investment entities to take long-term and significant positions, and therefore success of TRX now would be a success of not only getting a good valuation, but keeping a good valuation.
Correct.
Thank you, Steve.
So on that point, just to supplement Jim's point, is Mike and Andrew are constantly looking at models and what fundamental value is of potential of the assets, and the information that we're gathering will give us more information and confidence in those numbers.
Yeah, Stephen, I think one of the conversations we often have, and it's worthy for the shareholders to know this, is that we're very focused on the denominator. So remember, the fact that we have a plant that's now up and running and ticking along like a Swiss watch, we're not having to go back to the markets and raise funds through equity at this point, right? And that's
we've done even gold prepays, and there's other avenues that are opening up now too as well. So yeah, you're right.
Stephen, it looks like we have a question from Craig Sutherland, one of our shareholders.
Can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Craig.
Okay, very good. First of all, Jim, it's great to see you. Longtime friend, and you look great. Good to hear your voice. I think you kind of touched on really where I wanted to go with it. Being a longtime shareholder, is you guys are doing a great job of creating the value and the steps. I'm kind of amazed at how fast you've put this into play. That being said, what is the strategy when it comes to institutional investors and those types of things coming in and looking at it? You're having significant success, but while you're developing the projects and your strategy, are you currently talking with institutions? Are you talking to fund managers? Are you talking, and is there visibility with a profile?
Yes, there is. So, for instance, Mike and myself will be at the BMO Investor Conference starting on Sunday. We are consistently having meetings with institutional investors. The reason why you hear the program that we're going to be laying out in the next 2 years is an institutional investor needs to have runway on what the growth profile of the enterprise is in order for them to calculate what a potential return is. So we're starting to get that information together so that they can get more comfortable that the asset will eventually give them the return profile that they desire. So yeah, we do that ongoing all the time.
Okay, and then one last question. I know I'm going to see some little giggles and smiles, but when you said that, I think it was the 2018 study that was showing 153 million or whatever, you said it's multiples. Are we talking like a 2x, 3x? I mean, how significantly undervalued do you see from the profiles? Because we're seeing all of the drilling and the mapping of this, and the potential is significant.
Yeah, look, just to give you a sense of that, the oxide mine plan would be greater than that on a NAV basis, which is 10% of the deposit. But obviously, it's going to matter in Andrew's work what the proven and probable number is. And we got to work that through, but it's going to be, I suspect it should be, and I'll be disappointed if it's not, significantly higher than that. And it's, what I would say is, I said positive surprises on CapEx. There's been, a lot of properties are $500 million to get to 200,000 ounces. We're not going to get anywhere near that. So a lot lower than that. So that drives your number as well. So for instance, I think the plant size in that study was, what was it, 2,000 tons a day, Andrew, or 2,500 tons a day, roughly?
Roughly correct, yeah.
Yeah, and the capital cost of that was 70 million, and we did it for 6.5.
Yeah. We're not even going to be anywhere close to that.
So we won't even, just to give you a sense of some of the metrics.
It's probably worth noting, Stephen, the study was also done at 1,300 gold. And you heard Jim's comments at the outset of the call of certainly where we are, but hopefully where we're going with gold prices.
Yeah, and I've looked at gold price to follow it quite a bit and analyst, and what happens in these resets is the cost basis. So what all the big miners do is they go back and relook at their mine plans and try to maximize net present value and cash flow again. And so the cost basis of the whole industry, including with the inflation that's gone on, which we've managed quite well. The cost basis of the industry now is, in our guesstimate and analyst guesstimate, when they put together the cash cost curve, is the 80th percentile is probably hitting around $1,700 an ounce. There's kind of a floor. So the last floor that when we looked at it 3 or 4 years ago was around $1,250. So a regular commodity will trade at 80% of the cash cost curve normally, if it's not being driven by other factors such as what we're seeing going on in the world.
Great. Well, continued success for all of you. And if there's 2 minutes before we end, Jim, I would love to hear what his prognosis is for the gold market going forward.
Yeah, well, we could do that. A lot of people like to listen to Jim's forecast for it. He's gotten them right several times. So
absolutely. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much.
I run the business on what a floor is going to be. Like I said, if we hit the, because that's what you have to do to make prudent investment decisions. But if it goes and pops, then great. We're all lucky.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Looks like there's 3 or 4 questions in the queue. Steve Reiser, it looks like your mic's unmuted. Please go ahead.
Sure. First of all, like the other gentleman had mentioned, I want to compliment the team on really superior operational performance over the last 2 years. It's impressive. The creation of the 1,000 tons plant and some of the additional exploration successes. The one variable we wanted to ask you about is just the peak oil proposition. I know this one is a little more strategic and broad-based in nature, but mining is a very expensive operation. If oil prices were continuing to rise, I know you use natural gas and also hydro, but there is kind of a pull effect associated with that. Is there any risk to the NPV calculations that are coming up if we were to see a situation where we were at $100 a barrel of oil or 150 or 200? Where would this company be in terms of its degree of insulation and ability to continue to mine in that type of environment?
So what I would say there, Steve, that goes into the what I was just mentioning as well. So oil prices is a factor that everybody has to deal with, including us. So obviously we have trucks and excavators and things of that nature that burn diesel. We also have diesel generators as backup power, predominantly on the national power grid. And I'll mention something on the national power grid too, which has been great and a good outcome for us, is the local community that's closest to us, or the largest community, Kataro, is now on another line. They've been moved on to the main line in Tanzania, and that's freed up a lot of capacity on our line. So our capacity factor, Andrew, what's it gone from 7 megawatts potential to 15 megawatt potential right now?
Yeah, it's gone from about 3.5 and potentially up to 15.
Yeah,
and what that means is we most likely will not have to install a major substation.
So that's one factor to Steve that will be insulated from. Now, with regards to the mining fleet, now we'd have to do the calculation of how much fuel is as a percentage of our operating cost. I don't think we have that off our cuff at this point. But what ends up happening is that 80th percentile of the cash cost curve rises for everybody. And what you'll see is the commodity price will reset too. You've seen gold and oil move in tandem for those reasons. So you're a little bit insulated because the market will reset the price as well. And that's what I've seen over time. That kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks, Stephen and team.
No, thank you very much for your question. Next we have Peter. You want to unmute yourself? Let me see if I can unmute you. No, can't unmute you. So you have to, Peter, unmute yourself to ask your question. All right, I'll ask Rositza. You want to unmute yourself? There you go. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning,
I can
how are you?
only.
It's afternoon where you are. It's afternoon.
It is indeed. Yes, it's late afternoon, in fact. First of all, I would like to echo the thoughts of the earlier speakers and congratulate the team for the excellent results achieved over the last 2 years. I would also like to extend special thanks to Mr. Sinclair for the guidance, in my case, over the last 15 years. The only concern I have at the moment, and admittedly it's a luxury problem to have, is the company able to fend off a hostile takeover approach? We see what's happening in the area of M&A. We know how undervalued the asset is. Do we have a plan if we get approached?
Yeah, look, as we opened the meeting, we had 52% vote, which is high for a junior mining company. So we have a good shareholder outreach program. We know where our shareholders are. So that's partly a defense mechanism, is actually knowing who your shareholders are and the ability to talk to them fairly quickly, especially your larger shareholders. So I would say right now, it would be difficult to get their votes at current value. So that's because I think that's part of your question. Yeah. The other parts are, typically what you see in those situations is a rights offering. A hostile takeover bid would also, it would need to build government relationships, right? And get those sort of approvals. So we're well positioned around that. So there's various mechanisms and various ways to fend off a hostile takeover bid.
In that case, the future looks even brighter. Best of luck for 2023.
And to a certain degree, look, we don't go and ask for M&A. We're certainly not for sale. But if you're attractive because you've done great work, well, it's because you've done the great work, right? So we want to continue to do that, but we need to do what we're doing in order to get appropriate value for the asset, and that's helpful as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. And I think the last one is Peter. You could try to come off mute. No, he's not speaking. So, are there any other questions?
Evan, maybe any in-person questions in the Toronto office?
I don't think so. No willing participants.
Excellent.
But many keen listeners.
Excellent. Okay, so Jim, there's been a request from several shareholders on which I'm sure is a bullish outlook on gold. You and I always talk about, there's always geopolitical mess in the world. Human beings have always fought each other and positioned against each other, and we're in an interesting time, no doubt, right now, as the underlying geopolitical pinning of various countries wanting to displace the U.S. dollar with something else. So why don't you give your prognosis to where gold can go?
Well, you've hit the nail right on the head. Basic, traditional, underlying, fundamental positives for gold have already taken us for a very short period of time above 2,000. The major metals firms, those that I trust as being extremely wise and conservative, can see gold trading between 2,500 and 3,000, assuming what's taking place now, the traditional methods, all can stay in place. Without any comment on U.S. politics or the U.S. Federal Reserve or the people there, let us take a look at what's happening around the world in contract settlement, because the value of the U.S. dollar is not set by the USDX index. It's extraordinarily small, and it's just a measure of one currency against another. We have a more important factor, which is what will the dollar buy? Because what the dollar will buy, and is how from 72 to now, been the leading positive kingmaker. And contracts around the world on everything and anything have been written in US dollars, which means when the contract settles, there's a demand for US dollars in order to make those settlements, and world trade is enormous. And there is your big bull factor in the US dollar. We have now what is let's call it a collaboration. We have in the BRICS nations a great deal of conversation concerning the creation of a mechanism in which gold would be involved, that would be not only generally acceptable, but in fact, if you took a look at it, it may stop the dollar from having a significant impact from an inflation which could easily get out of hand. We don't have a Volcker now, okay? So if we go from collaboration to full integration, then I suggest to you that China and Russia, India, all of the BRICS will set the price. The price now is set in a market of extraordinary borrowing. The price of gold is set by major speculators and major operators. But the truth of the matter is that if there was an increasing demand for physical gold in the world, you might run into a situation of non-obtainium. And so gold would become a new atomic symbol. And in that you could have a spike, but very much like what this company is attempting to do with new capable, able, experienced, and energetic management. This time the price of gold would hold because trading would go away from the futures exchanges towards the 9 physical exchanges that have now been set up in terms of their mechanism, but not used significantly as a competitor to the items which can be speculated upon, on which bets can be made. The casino can continue to operate. However, the moment you see the present collaboration moving towards a solid creation, let's call it a reset, which will include gold and then and somewhat modify any problems the dollar would have, the price of gold would reach substantially higher and stay substantially higher. We are in the right business, gentlemen, ladies, and we now have the right management. I would tend to say the greatest decision I ever made in my life, Steve, was firing myself. And, you know, I'll find you the gold anytime you want it, Andrew, you know that. But you're the people that are going to take that gold and handle the cash extraordinarily well and expand through not only what we have now, but you are experts at mergers and acquisitions. And I know that expertise couldn't be held down by chains. So I am more excited about what we have now than I've ever been. As you all know, I tend to fully commit. Also, I tend to be early. That means I tend to feel pain. But this arrangement, as it stands, offers us not only a proper valuation for what we have, but a permanent valuation for what we have. I think we'll be the leaders of our trend until we enter the hoped for definition of a major.
So Jim, also one of the things on gold price that you and I have discussed at length is, you know, the countries that are attempting to start to settle in non-US dollar. You see, you know, we all know who they are: China, Russia, India, the BRICS, essentially. and South Africa, etc. They all have one commonality. China is the largest gold producer. So if you're going to back something, then you want to make sure that you have a lot of what you're backing it with. So China is the largest gold producer, one of the largest holders. Russia is a significant gold producer, one of the largest holders. South Africa's got numerous mines, some of the world's best gold mines. And then India, they just, so it certainly is a commodity that makes sense if you're looking to replace the US dollar with something else to settle conflict, which creates the demand, as Peter said. Currently, US dollar settlements, great US dollar demand. If it's something else that's backed, say, by gold, which Mr. Sinclair is saying, then it will create demand and the price will go up. Did I summarize that correctly, Jim?
On point. Exactly on point.
So with that, I think if there isn't any further questions, Evan, I think we move forward to close the meeting, the informal part.
Could I ask one question, if you can hear me?
I'll just make a quick summary statement. Thank you for being shareholders. Thank you for your support, your kind words. One of the things that we did notice over the last year is there's a lot of new shareholders. A lot of shareholders have increased positions as well. So we thank our new shareholders, our long-term shareholders, and we look forward to growing the business together.
Stephen, I think Peter's been able to unmute himself, so maybe we have time for one more question.
One more question. Yeah. Take all questions.
Okay, I was just going to ask you described the company now as in a unique position as a junior miner because of its complete structure. So how are you intending to get that message across to potential shareholders and the investment community to show that TRX really has got the potential that will enable them to invest with confidence in the company in the future? Because many of us have been very patient shareholders but have yet to see jam today as opposed to jam tomorrow or jam yesterday, which is many years ago. So I mean, you've done a terrific job turning the whole process forward. I'm just asking really how you're going to capitalize on that in the short to medium term so that hungry retail shareholders, the dumb money like me, are going to continue to be satisfied.
Yeah, so it's a good question, Peter. And so if you followed the story since I've joined and the others on this call, you'll see constant progression. You'll also see a building of confidence of what we say we're going to do, we've actually done, and what we say we're going to do in the future, we will do our best to do it. And the building blocks to getting the value of Buckreef, we laid out a lot of the things that we need to do. We're in progress of doing those. That will help in the short to medium term, as well as hopefully we get better markets. But markets have been downright terrible, but at the end of the day, that's why you put in place the business plan that we put in place. So we don't need to rely on the markets in order to move forward. And the markets will reset and reprice as well. I can't talk to, prior to joining and what the cost basis of other investors were at that point in time. What I can talk to is what we've done in the last 2 years. We've done what we say we're going to do. We're proving to the market that we can do it. And the market will eventually start to realize that the risk profile here is probably lower than they anticipated because we do as we say.
Yeah, and Stephen, I'll just maybe comment quickly, and Jim touched on it in his remarks as well. Everything we do as a management team and a board is through the lens of fundamental valuation and valuation accretion. All the areas that Stephen touched on that are catalysts that are coming down the pipeline very, very quickly, again, are through that lens of valuation accretion. And look, we're an impatient group. We've got our foot firmly planted on the accelerator, and you are pushing all these value levers to hopefully drive that valuation accretion in the very, very near term. You know, we are price takers, as Stephen touched on, and certainly hope for a more buoyant environment into the future. But within our control, staring right in front of us here is what we've got with Buckreef that we can exploit and leverage and develop and grow, and are doing it as quickly and as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible through the lens of our shareholders, and again, what we want to do on valuation. So just understand that all these decisions we're making are through that guise and that lens.
Yeah, on the point on Accelerator, you know, when I think you know, everybody says we've done everything so quickly. Andrew, when do I usually want to have things done by? I know you got to come off mute.
Yes, I'm on mute because I also have a little bit of a cough. But yes, so normally last month, Stephen, if you're being generous.
Last month, yeah, if I'm being generous. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's a little joke with the shareholders, but yes, I mean, Stephen, indeed, sometimes you said like I wanted that yesterday, so you're slacking off.
Yeah, no, I understand the dynamic of that. I'm just, well, I think you've done a tremendously good job, as I wrote in an email I sent yesterday, just to the shareholder email box. But I've been a long-term shareholder, and I'm very happy with the way the firm's been moving forward with oil staff and everything. So I'm looking forward to continuing to be one. So I'm just, but like many shareholders, we are, you know, we've been impatient for a long time. But the gold market has been depressed for a long time, and the gold share market even worse. But in the end, that's what makes price go up. Of course, is more buyers coming in. That's the name of the game. And
yeah,
you can't control that. You have to let it happen. So I'm here for the ride, and I think you've got a very sound project there. And I'm very interested to hear your insights of all of you, because quite clearly there's a lot of expertise in the firm now, which is really coming to the fore. So that's looking very, very good as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for putting up with ordinary retail shareholders like me and trying to answer our questions in a sensible and intelligent and sensitive manner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Are there any other questions before we close off?
Are you going to, Steve, or would you like me to?
Why don't you end, Jim?
Well,
go ahead.
It's been, I think, a milestone meeting. I think that Peter has an entirely different shareholding investment that he had before. I think this has been a meeting that has helped everyone, including me, to better understand what's taking place. And unless there's some new business that is proper to this meeting, I would declare as chairman the meeting closed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
your
very
support.
much.
Ladies.
Perfect. We'll see how that pans out. What are the prices? I can take it in. Well, TRX share price has risen a little, thanks to my excellent question, no doubt. And these guys certainly know what they're on about. They're a much stronger management team than the previous ones.